Hey sports fan, I recently acquired and read a horror novella that I truly hated, and I hated it so much that I felt like I needed to talk about it, solo, one-on-one, just really tear in to this book. And that was Coup De Grace by Sophia Ajram, I believe is how you pronounce their last name. This book is so bad. I gave this a 1-star rating. I don't give 0-star ratings and I don't give half-star ratings. If I did, this would have been like a 0.5. I gave it a 1 on the vibes and the story because there is one part that started to be interesting and then it was very short-lived. I gave it a 0.5 on technical skill because it's very poorly written. I would not recommend this to anybody. In fact, this review is going to be heavy on spoilers because I don't think that you should read this. It's actually probably, maybe, one of the worst books I've read in a really long time. This is worse than Graveyard Shift. This is worse than One Dark Window. This is worse than Dreams of the Dying. Obviously, I would not reread it. So let's jump in so I can just complain and then wash this book from my mind. I want to start by talking about the back of the book. I guess I'm just going to read it to you. Vickin has a plan: throw himself into the St. Lawrence River in Montreal and end it all for good, believing it to be the only way out for him after a lifetime of depression and pain. But stepping off the subway, he finds himself in an endless looping station. Determined to find a way out again, he starts to explore the rooms and corridors ahead of him. But no matter how many claustrophobic hallways or vast cathedral-esque rooms he passes through, the exit is nowhere in sight. The more he explores his strange new prison, the more he becomes convinced that he hasn't been trapped here accidentally, and among the shadows and concrete, he comes to realize that he almost certainly is not alone. I feel like that synopsis kind of makes this sound like a scary Piranesi, where it's like this vast, labyrinthian, never-ending maze of like a subway station, which sounds cool and spooky and interesting. Somehow this author takes that and makes it really, really boring and actually irritating to read. Right off the bat with that synopsis, it says that he's alone and suspects that he might not be the only one here. In the book, he immediately meets another person, like immediately. So that was just really misleading because it makes it sound like he's alone in this place and he's not. There's another person there who has been there longer than him. This book is extremely bloated, and that sounds insane to say for a book that's 130 pages, but it's so overwritten. It could have been 25 pages long. It could have been a short story like in a magazine, and it probably still would have sucked, but at least it would have only been 20 pages long. Let me just read you a little smidge. Okay, so at this part, Vic is on the subway and he puts his headphones on and he, I guess, is like drifting off. It's so vague. It's so difficult to understand what's going on. And then that chapter ends and a new chapter begins. And this is the very beginning of a new chapter after he has kind of zoned out on the subway. It starts as a pinprick needlepoint, face on, microscopic, a luminous dot, unfolding itself from behind, wiggling from dot to line, a thread dancing in an ocean of darkness. The sky before the stars, it is a growing skein of constellations, bleak and unrecognizable. Their essence starts to fade and at once explodes in a fit of fury into 1,000 shards, wriggles, and broils, effervescing into something larger and more complex, impaling slats of light, a howl of fluorescence through darkness no longer shrouded in emptiness, but gestating somehow into an empty rooms, multiplying like cells, mapping the interior void from which we later arise. What the fuck are you talking about? You said so many words and you didn't say anything. And the entire book is like that. It's just these long, verbose passages that are like homegirl found a thesaurus for the first time in her life and went, wow, I never realized there were so many words, and decided to just put them all into a short book. It's so nonsensical, and it rambles like that so often that I found myself, I hate to admit this, I found myself skimming huge portions of this book because the rambling was just is so tedious and so difficult to get through. And I just wanted to know what was going on because the rambling isn't even relevant. In a lot of books, I can force myself to actually read kind of the long existential stream of consciousness sort of thoughts that are happening because they have something to offer. In this book, there are long, just winding, rambling rants that have nothing to offer. They bring absolutely nothing to the story except to make you hate the main character. If you didn't already hate him, you will hate him by the end of the book, and you will just want him to end his life. I guess to really describe to you how much I hate this book and the characters, I need to give you like a very brief what actually happens in the book. So in the very beginning of the book, we're introduced to our main character, Vic. He's deeply depressed. He says that he's been depressed for his entire life. Nothing helps. Medication doesn't help. Therapy doesn't help. He's called the suicide hotline many times and they talk him back from the ledge, but he still deeply wants to die. And so he's on his way to the beach to drown himself. On the subway, this happens in like the first 2 pages. A very attractive man boards the subway and sits next to Vic. I don't know if Vic is supposed to be super attractive. He doesn't describe himself as being attractive. Later in the book, he describes himself, and I may be interpreting this wrong, but kind of like, I picture him as being kind of slovenly, especially because he talks about how he's deeply depressed and he doesn't take care of himself and all this other stuff. But for some reason, this man, this beautiful man who boards the train, is instantly attracted to our main character. He strikes up barely a conversation. They say a couple of words, but our main character is like reading into a couple of words. I don't know what it's like to be this type of person, so I've never had this sort of experience. But basically, the attractive man, his name is Felix, asks him where he's getting off. And our main character tells him, and then they both get off at the next stop together. They go into a public bathroom and they have a physical liaison. Wait, let me just say it how he says it in the book. This is how he describes their encounter in the book. If Felix does remember me, remember that I existed, it'll only be that I sucked him off in a restroom. That's romantic. That is the extent of their relationship. Vic tries to work up the nerve to maybe like ask Felix on a date, and even in his internal dialogue, he is like, maybe this will save me. I think he's trying to be sarcastic, but he can't muster up the nerve to ask Felix on a date. And so Felix gets off at his stop, but then he pauses, he hesitates. Felix writes his phone number down on a subway ticket and gives it to our main character, Vic, and then they go their separate ways. Vic, I think, dozes off. It's very vague, it's so confusing. He dozes off on the subway. When he wakes up, he just gets off the subway. He doesn't say that he's arrived at the correct stop or that he missed his stop. He doesn't really explain why he gets off at what seems like a very strange stop, a completely empty, vast subway station, but he gets off the train. And then he immediately realizes that he's in some sort of subway version of a hellscape. He is very quickly greeted by a woman who she shows up behind him and she's like, just my luck that I'm not here and a train comes. He does not learn her name. He calls her Pashmina because she has a pashmina. He finds out that she has terminal cancer. She's not necessarily depressed, but she wants to go out on her own terms. She doesn't want cancer to be the reason she dies. She wants to be in control of her life and her death. And he quite literally compares his depression with her terminal cancer. He calls them the same thing. I've been depressed in my life in the past, and it can be devastating and it can be extremely difficult to live with. It's hard to function and it's hard to wrap your mind around and it's hard to get out of. It is not the same as a terminal disease. It's just not. I'm sorry. Being depressed is not the same as having terminal cancer. And to compare the two is so incredibly tone deaf and self-centered that it's borderline offensive. I would never in my life, I would never look at somebody who had to lose their leg to cancer and say, oh, you know, I used to be depressed. It's basically the same thing. It's not the same thing. If you think it's the same, maybe you should seek therapy. This woman, Pashmina, and Vic wander around this infinite subway station and they see something that horrifies them. I didn't think it was like as horrifying as they did, and I think it's just because it's not written very well in the book. But basically it's like all of these people that Vic recognizes, and I assume Pashmina also recognizes, who are kind of like melted into the concrete of the building, like of the walls and the floor. They look like they're still alive, and then like part of this amalgamation like slurps off of the wall and walks towards them. They get terrified, they book it, they run away. Now this part is so confusing because Pashmina is running. She is booking it for her life and he's following her. I don't know why he's following her. She doesn't like him and he doesn't seem to like her either. But I guess because they're the only people here that they've kind of linked together. Let me see. Okay. So they're running, she turns a corner and he's right behind her. She reels and hits my chest as I am blowing in around the bend just in time to see. And bowing forward hard, folding over the waist-high balcony of cement, winded, knocked off her feet, she falls, and there is a silence stretched too long as I grip the edges of the cavity in the wall she's just disappeared into, the world spinning like a carnival before her until she descends the dizzying height of a pit, and with a blow of exhalation hits the concrete floor with a meaty smack. You may think, as I thought, that that indicated her death. That is the end of a chapter, and the next chapter begins. The horrible smell of Pashmina's piss and blood and excrement beams into my senses as I try to carry her on the unforgiving pilgrimage back to the station turnstiles. So I thought she died and he was dragging her dead body along. No, she just broke her leg. That was such a weird way to say that she fell and broke her leg. And I only read that passage and bring it up as another example of just the very poor writing. It's like this person just strung together words. I was actually describing this to a friend and she said, it sounds like it was written by AI. Now she didn't read it. I was just describing the book to her and reading a couple of passages to her. And that's when she said, it sounds like it was written by AI. It doesn't sound like it was written by a human. I'm not making any sort of accusations or claims. I am just telling you an opinion, a critique, if you will. Obviously, Pashmina dies. She gets like sucked into the building and our hero Vic goes off on his own. He doesn't do anything. He just complains. He complains about being depressed. He complains about being here. He starts to self-harm. It's very confusing because he also is saying that like there's cement in his body and that he's like trying to cut it out and then like cutting to make sure that he's bleeding blood, not bleeding like gray cement. I don't know if it's like he's supposed to be going crazy. Then there's a whole passage, and this was the only part that I liked, where he plays the like viral elevator game. And he has a very strange interaction with another person, but he's so stupid and annoying that he doesn't interact with the other person, they interact with him. Then the elevator gets stuck and a voice comes over like the phone in the elevator, like the maintenance phone, and talks to him. And I thought that that part was the only interesting part. It was so short-lived and it didn't go anywhere. And in the context of the story, it did not make any sense. Just to cut to the end, our hero Vic finds a room that is basically what he was looking for in the very beginning. It is like a beach with a body of water. He fills his pockets with rocks. He walks into the water, but then something is deep in the water with him and he freaks out and swims to shore. Then the book becomes a choose your own adventure. At this point, there are, let's see, 20? Maybe 30. 110. So at this point, there are 26 pages left in the book, and it becomes a little choose your own adventure. I don't know why she chose to write it this way, because it's written directly to the reader. Vic is talking to us, and he gives you choices. It doesn't matter what you choose. I'm almost certain that there's only one real ending, and we'll get to that. I didn't actually make any choices. I just kept reading the book in a linear style, the way that I think it's meant to be. I don't think you're meant to actually make choices. I think that this was a way for the author to try to, I don't know, interact with the audience to make you feel more invested. It didn't work. It was just annoying, especially because no matter what you choose, Vic, the main character, mocks you for whatever choice that you made. He berates you and insults you. That was, in my opinion, a bad move. I already hate this character and I already hate this book. Could you please not call me stupid? Literally, word for word, calls you stupid, calls you an asshole and a piece of poop. It was such a weird choice and it didn't need to be there at all. Once you make your choices, you're left with two potential endings. The first of which is that he reconnects with the man from the train, Felix, and they like live happily ever after and his depression is cured by the power of love and wieners. Or what I believe is the actual intended ending, which is that he goes back to the room with the beach and the body of water and he gets in the water and then like slits his own throat and dies. And that's the end of the book. Thanks for bearing with me for all of that. I'm sorry it took me so long to describe such a stupid fucking book. Let's get down to brass tacks. Let's get down to the nitty-gritty. Vic is a verbose, self-centered, selfish, tone-deaf piece of shit person. I thought that Jaspar from Dreams of the Dying was self-centered. Vic puts Jaspar to shame. Vic makes Jaspar look like Gandhi. Vic is such a self-centered and self-important crapbag. There's no redeeming qualities about him. His only personality trait is being depressed and being really self-important. I don't know how else to describe him. In my review that I posted to Goodreads, I said, have you ever met someone who thinks that they're brilliant, that everything they do is not just noteworthy, but wholly unique and original? They brag about their high school achievements and how all the boys or girls wanted to date them in middle school, how they're so attractive and special and no one else could possibly understand their struggle. Now imagine that that personality is a book. That's what reading this felt like. I don't know a better way to describe it. That's how reading this felt. It felt like the author was constantly patting herself on the back for being so deep and brilliant. The book reads like the author thinks that this book is like the great American novel. She thinks this is a life-changing novel. She thinks that this is a book that people are going to read and they're going to flush their SSRIs down the toilet and they're never going to feel depressed again because this book cured them. It was a life-changing event and it's just really a shitty book. I almost feel bad talking shit like so harshly about this book, but I cannot stress to you enough how bad reading this was. Luckily, it only took me about 2 hours to read because it is technically short. It felt like forever. It felt like an actual eternity trying to just wade through the quicksand of this fucking book. In literal real time, it only took about 2 hours. At least I didn't waste like a week trying to read this. I'm sorry that this is so rambly. I didn't actually take notes to organize my thoughts, so you're really just getting them as they come to me. Another issue that I had is it seems, I don't know how else to interpret this. It seems that the train station is an allegory for depression, but it doesn't make sense with the elevator scene. I didn't describe the elevator scene in enough detail. He plays the elevator game and it like works, kind of. A person boards the elevator, but our main character, Vic, is too stupid and scared to actually look at this person or interact with them at all. So this person gets on the elevator. They have a solo cup full of some sort of liquid that presumably they're drinking. Vic recognizes the smell as caustic soda, so it's acid in the cup. The person asks Vic where he's going. Vic doesn't answer, and the elevator doors open, and Vic hears what he believes to be like a party. He says it sounds like an office party, like people are talking, and there's music playing, and there's maybe people singing. This person asks Vic, "Would you like to join us?" Vic does not respond. The person says, "Well, if you change your mind, your cup will be waiting for you." And then they get off the elevator. That's the extent of that interaction. If this place is an allegory for depression, then what the hell was that? It's an allegory, but it is a real physical place because Pashmina was a real person. She had a whole life story that she talked about. So she was a real person that he had never met before and met in this place. So it's a real place, but it's also not a real place, which means that the other people that he interacts with are also real. So what was that? Was it hell? I don't... What? My husband also read this book and he also hated it. He said the same thing that I said and the same thing that other people who have reviewed this and my friend who I was talking about this book to all thought in the beginning that this place was like a purgatory. He even calls it an in-between at some point. Vic calls it an in-between more than once. And so that makes it sound like a purgatory, like Vic did go attempt to kill himself, and in the fraction of a second between life and death, he came here. But it's not, because it is a actual physical place where other people exist. So I don't think it's so much a purgatory as much as it is a representation of your state of mind. On that note, why was Pashmina here? She wasn't suicidal. She didn't want to die. She didn't want cancer to kill her. She wasn't just depressed. She was struggling with a terminal condition. Not only is she in this place where she doesn't really deserve to be, she has the most graphic and disgusting death on scene. It's very disturbing. It made me feel like the author has no respect for patients of chronic illness or patients of terminal illness. It felt like such a callous and cruel way to approach a condition like that, which is really kind of gross. It grosses me out and it makes me feel like this author is not a very good person if that's how they interpret people who lose the battle with cancer. Basically, Vic in the book tell us that terminal cancer is the same as depression and that both of them should be punished because Vic does kill himself in the end. He takes his own life. He is successful in his efforts. I don't have a lot more to say about this book. I hated it so much. I will not be reading anything from this author ever again. In fact, I kind of hope that they never write anything ever again. I saw that the author was a Shirley Jackson Award nominee and a Stoker Award winner. I don't understand. Anyway, I don't have a lot more to say about this book. I tried to get my husband to come in and talk about it, and he said that he didn't want to.
My wife suggests a lot of books a lot of the time that she is going to be reading, and they're usually like pretty good. This was not good. This was not good at all. I don't know what this book is trying to be or what it was doing. The beginning of it was kind of interesting. And you're wondering what's going to happen here. Ariel said it before, like there's like an interesting part with an elevator. It's kind of neat. Some of this stuff, I don't know if it was written by like AI or the person like looked up what younger people like or what they're doing, like the memes that are on the internet. Now there's a lot of this AI generated stuff where it's like you need to make sure that you do X, Y, and Z step if you enter the sideways rooms, whatever they're calling them, back rooms, yeah. And don't look to the left. And if you see a clown, make sure you jerk it off or something like that. That's kind of what a bunch of it felt like near the end. The sad part is like that was the most interesting part. Was like this weird copy and paste elevator game thing. I listened to it on audiobook because I drive a lot. And the part at the end where it becomes a choose your own adventure situation does not work in the audiobook format, even a little bit. So like you could do the choose your own adventure thing if it was a physical book and I guess get some more out of this. But like the longer I listened to it, the more that I was just like upset and was super glad that it was only like 2 hours long. Then can I spoil it? Yeah, when he dies at the end, and that's like supposed to be the real ending, I guess. I was just like, good. There doesn't need to be another one of these. We don't need to know any more about this person. Just a bad, shitty time. If you've seen the other videos, the dreams of the dying. Jaspar is like. That's at least he's written in such a way that like you don't like him because he has these flaws that aren't being fixed, or when you think they're gonna be fixed, they don't, and it makes you like dislike him, but like in a good way, like a good character building way. I just didn't like this character in this book. I just didn't like this character. It was so strange. Even when his companion that's there for a second, the only other person in this weird liminal space dies, he's just like, meh. Yeah, that's fine. All right, on with my life.
What do you think that this author is trying to say about like depression?
Oh, I have no idea. I actually have no idea. I don't know a lot of people, but like a couple of depressed people that I've talked to. I don't know. It doesn't feel like this translates very well, but maybe I'm just not very imaginative. Or maybe it does. Maybe I'll play the other side of this. Maybe it is a very good interpretation of how bad and desperate it feels to be in that situation where you have all these choose your adventure moments where something good happens, but like your depression actually is just like, no, that didn't happen. That would never happen. You're a bad person, and good things can happen to you. Like maybe that's a better interpretation of what they were trying to go for, but it didn't feel like that.
One of the things that made me very upset was that the other woman who's there has cancer, and it. Not only does he say that it's the same as being depressed, he says word for word that her terminal cancer is the same as his depression, but it also feels like the book is punishing her.
Yeah, for wanting to go out the way that she wants to go out. You have to be in the train station of endless depression and monsters. So I don't know. See, that's a... I put that on the side when I was trying to give it the best interpretation. You can't give it the best interpretation when one of the occupants of Depression Station is this cancer patient who doesn't actually have depression.
Any other thoughts you want to share?
It just wasn't good. At least it wasn't super expensive.
How do you feel about the way it's written?
What do you mean?
The style in which it is written.
I mean, I don't think any of it's particularly good or creative.
The word that I kept coming back to was bloated.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's only so many descriptive words, you know, in the first quarter of a thesaurus. So like that's where they landed on their descriptors. For as short as it was, I'm surprised it riled me up so much. It was the polar opposite of like listening to The Caretaker and being like, "Oh man, what is going to happen? There's only X amount of time left." I was like, "Oh man, can this thing be done like faster than this, please?" And like I like to finish things. If there was ever one that I was going to give up on, it'd be this one. But like it's so short. It's so short. How are you going to give up on a 3-hour listen? You know.
All right. If you had to give it a star rating, what would you rate it?
Oh, none.
None.
1. It's a book. It is a book that you can read. That is a thing that it is. But like, you could read anything else. You could read There's a whole bunch of Steinbecks that are just smaller than this. Like... Yeah, like any of those would be better than this. That's my final thoughts. It is a book. It's not worth reading. 1 star because it is a book, and that's it.
Thank you for giving me your thoughts.
Yeah, you're welcome.
This has gotten really long-winded. I've rambled quite a bit. I'm very sorry that it wasn't more structured or organized. I just didn't write my thoughts down. I just finished this book like 2 or 3 days ago, and I'm going off the cuff, just my thoughts as they come to me, the things that bothered me as I was reading it. I appreciate you sticking around if you have made it this far. If this is your first time seeing me, this is not what I normally do on this channel. I mean, I do book reviews, but I don't normally just harp on things that I hate. I prefer to talk about things that I really enjoy. So if you're here for like a hate marathon or like a lot of hate reading, that's not really what I do. I don't normally just talk about things that I hate. I would really prefer to talk about things that I enjoy. But, you know, this one, it was just so bad. I felt like it really deserved its own video. So if you've made it this far, I really appreciate you. Thanks for hanging out. Maui says hi.